Most students sit quietly in class, take notes, nod their heads, pretend they understand. Harvard students, they interrupt, they challenge, they argue, and somehow they get smarter faster. Same books, same lectures, same time, different result. Why? Because they use a discussion method that forces the brain to think instead of absorb. And no, it's not about being talkative. It's a system, a brutal one. I'm about to break it down, and by the end of this, you'll never study quietly again. Chapter 1. Passive learning is a lie. Most people think learning means listening. Wrong. Listening feels productive. It's not. You sit there. You hear information. You recognize it. Your brain says, yeah, I get it. You don't. This is called the illusion of competence. Researchers like Robert Bjork have been warning about this for decades. Recognition is not understanding. It's familiarity. Big difference. Harvard figured this out a long time ago. That's why many of their classes, especially law, business, and philosophy, use something called the Socratic method. Translation: you don't get to sit quietly. You get called out randomly. Professor looks at you. Explain this concept. No notes. No warning. You freeze. You panic. You try to answer. And that moment right there, that's learning. Because your brain is forced to retrieve, organize, and defend information under pressure. That's active recall. Same principle surgeons use. Same principle top performers use. But here's the problem, though. Most people avoid this. Why? Because it's uncomfortable. You might be wrong. You might look stupid. So you stay quiet. And you stay average. Chapter 2. Thinking happens in conflict. Most people think clarity comes from reading more. Wrong. Clarity comes from friction. Harvard students don't just learn ideas. They collide them. You say one thing. Someone disagrees. Now you have to defend it. Not emotionally, logically. This forces something called elaborative interrogation. Psychologists use this term to describe what happens when you ask, why is this true? How does this connect? What if this is wrong? Every time you answer, your brain builds stronger neural connections, deeper encoding, stronger memory. Let me give you an example. Average student reads, free markets increase efficiency. They nod. Move on. Forget it tomorrow. Harvard student hears that and gets attacked. Define efficiency. What about monopolies? Does this apply globally? Give an example. Now they're forced to think, to connect theory with reality, to refine their understanding. And here's the key. They don't just defend. They get destroyed. And that's the advantage. Because when your idea breaks, your brain rewires it correctly. Mistakes aren't failures, they're upgrades. Erickson called this deliberate practice. Focus on errors, fix them fast. But here's the thing. You can argue all day and still learn nothing. If you're arguing randomly, that's where the system comes in. Chapter 3. The structured argument loop. Harvard discussions aren't chaos. They follow a pattern. A repeatable loop. 4 steps. Miss one, you lose the benefit. Step 1. Position. You take a stance. Clear, direct. Not it depends. Not vague nonsense. Pick a side. Why? Because your brain needs commitment to engage deeply. Indecision kills thinking. Step 2. Attack. Someone challenges you. Hard. They look for weaknesses, edge cases, contradictions, gaps. This is where most people break, because they realize they didn't actually understand what they said. Good. That's the point. Step 3. Defense. Now you respond. You clarify, adjust, strengthen. You're not just repeating information, you're restructuring it. This is called generative learning. You're creating knowledge, not consuming it. Step 4. Reflection. After the discussion, you review, where were you wrong? What did you miss? What changed? This is where the real learning locks in, because your brain flags those corrections as important. Emotion plus error equals memory. Studies from Make It Stick show this clearly. Struggle enhances retention. Comfort destroys it. So the loop is simple. Take a position. Get attacked. Defend. Reflect. Repeat over and over. That's how Harvard students compress years of thinking into months. But here's the problem, though. Most people never do this consistently. They try it once, feel uncomfortable, quit. So let's fix that. If you're still watching, it means you're not like most people. Good. Hit subscribe before you forget this. Because your brain will try to. It always does. We fix that here. Chapter 4. Forced articulation. Most people think they understand something because they can read it. Wrong. If you can't explain it, you don't understand it. Harvard students are constantly forced to speak. Explain, clarify, teach out loud. Why does this work? Because speaking exposes gaps instantly. In your head, everything sounds clear. Out loud, you stumble, you hesitate. You realize, I don't actually know this. This is called the Feynman technique. Explain it simply. If you can't, go back. Fix the gaps, repeat. Harvard just forces this constantly. You don't get to hide behind notes. You don't get to reread silently. You have to perform. And performance changes everything. Because now there's pressure. and pressure sharpens thinking. Neuroscience backs this up. When you speak under mild stress, your brain releases norepinephrine. This increases focus and memory encoding. Translation: you remember what you struggled to explain. You forget what you read passively. So instead of reading a chapter twice, explain it once. Out loud, even to yourself. Feel stupid? Good, it works. But here's the thing. Even this isn't enough. Because you can get good at explaining and still think shallow. Chapter 5. Multi-perspective thinking. Average students look for the right answer. Harvard students look for multiple answers. Then compare them. This is called cognitive flexibility. The ability to switch perspectives. And it's one of the strongest predictors of intelligence. So instead of asking, "What's the answer?" they ask, "What are the possible answers?" Why would someone disagree? What's the strongest counterargument? This forces your brain to build multiple models, not just one. And when you do that, you stop memorizing. You start thinking. Let's say you're learning history. Average approach: memorize dates, events, names, forget everything next week. Harvard approach: why did this happen? What were the incentives? What would I have done differently? How would the other side justify this? Now, you're not just learning history. You're simulating it. And simulation is powerful because your brain treats it like experience. Same neural pathways, stronger retention, deeper understanding. But here's the final problem. You now know how to discuss, argue, explain, and think. But if you never apply it alone, you're still dependent on others. Even if you use this discussion method, there's still one problem. What happens when you're studying alone? No one to challenge you, no one to argue with, no one to expose your gaps. You go back to passive learning and lose everything. That's why the smartest students don't rely on classrooms. They simulate discussions in their own head. They create artificial opposition. They ask, what would someone disagree with here? How would I defend this? What am I missing? They turn solo study into internal debate. And that is the final upgrade. Because now you don't need Harvard. You become Harvard, so here's the truth. Harvard students aren't smarter. They just think differently. They argue, they explain, they get things wrong. They fix them fast. While everyone else sits quietly, feeling productive, learning nothing. You can keep studying the old way, or you can start thinking. But if you still don't know how to structure your learning, how to choose what actually matters, how to avoid wasting time on useless information, then you're still playing the wrong game. That's why I made this video breaking down how Harvard students turn information into insight. Watch it next. It will change how you learn forever.